Time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legends. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the third age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose around the alabaster spire known as the White Tower. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. The wind twisted around the magnificent tower, brushing perfectly fitted stones and flapping majestic banners. The structure was somehow both graceful and powerful at the same time, a metaphor, perhaps, for those who had inhabited it for over 3,000 years. Few looking upon the tower would guess that at its heart it had been both broken and corrupted, separately. The wind blew, passing through a city that seemed more a work of art than a workaday capital. Each building was a marvel. Even the simple granite shop fronts had been crafted by meticulous ogier hands to evoke wonder and beauty. Here a dome hinted at the form of a rising sun. There a fountain sprang from the top of the building itself, cresting what appeared to be two waves crashing together. On one cobbled street, a pair of steep, three-story buildings stood opposite one another, each crafted into the form of amazement. The marble creations, half statue, half dwelling, reached with stone hands toward one another as if in greeting, hair billowing behind, immobile, yet carved with such delicacy that every strand seemed to undulate in the wind's passing. The streets themselves were far less grand. Oh, they had been laid out with care, radiating from the white tower like streaks of sunlight. Yet that sunlight was dimmed by refuse and clutter, hints at the crowding the siege had caused. And perhaps the crowding wasn't the only reason for the disrepair. The storefront signs and awnings hadn't seen wash or polish in far too long. Rotting garbage piled where it had been dumped in alleys, drawing flies and rats but driving away all others. Dangerous toughs lounged on the street corners. Once, they'd never dared do that, and certainly not with such arrogance. Where was the White Tower, the law? Young fools laughed, saying that the city's troubles were the fault of the siege, and that things would settle down once the rebels were quelled. Older men shook their gray-streaked heads and muttered that things had never been this bad, even when the savage Aiel had besieged Tarvalon some 20 years previously. Merchants ignored both young and old. They had their own problems, mainly on South Harbor, where trade into the city by way of river had nearly come to a halt. Thick-chested workers coiled beneath the eyes of an Aes Sedai wearing a red-fringed shawl. She used the one power to remove wards and weaken the stone, while workmen broke the rock apart and hauled it away. The workmen had sleeves rolled up, exposing curls of dark hair along burly arms as they swung pick or hammer, pounding at the ancient stones. They dripped sweat onto the rock and into the water below as they dug at the roots of the chain that blocked passage into the city by river. Half of that chain was now indestructible Coendiar, called Heartstone by some. The effort to tear it free and allow passage into the city was an exhausting one. The harbor stoneworks, magnificent and strong, shaped by the power itself, were only one of the more visible casualties in the silent war between the rebel Aes Sedai and those who held the tower. The wind blew through the harbor, where idling porters stood watching the workers chip the stones away one by one, sending flakes of gray-white dust to float on the water. Those with too much sense, or perhaps too little, whispered that such portents could only mean one thing: Tarmangaydan, the last battle, must quickly be approaching.